Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called To the Victor, written by Fibio. Vakar, the Despoiler, rather disliked the humans' White House. As a center of power, it left much to be desired in terms of shielding, communication, easy access to landing craft, and, most pressingly, climate control. He'd been informed that the only way they had of trying the Oval Office further was with clunky mobile units, and there was no way in the seven hells he was going to dictate terms surrounded by dehumidifiers. He even had to bring in a collapsible throne. What kind of planetary ruler didn't even have a throne on standby? Ah, well. He motioned to Yevon to send in the throneless moron.
President Sol enter,
Yevon barked, standing tall and proud of Vakar's left hand. He was a born officer, his carapace gleaming under the artificial lights, and took his role as second-in-command far too seriously for his health. The human that entered was anything but small, fleshy, and alarmingly moist. Humans were the closest thing to a water worlders that Vakar had ever seen, not actually lived beneath the waves. They put him in mind of a maggot that had figured out how they could put on clothes and walk around. Needless to say, he was not overly worried about fraternization incidents. President Sol stepped up to the throne, bent at the middle to display the back of his head, before rising again. Vakar made a mental note to check if that was an insulting display or one of respect. It felt like an insult.
Arise, President Sol, and listen to the words of your betters.
Selenin began to repeat his words in the local tongue. He was not typically one of Vakar's command staff, but Selenin had a truly miraculous gift for languages, and no one else had the first idea of what the locals were on about, except for her.
Your cities have fallen, your warriors flee to the hills, and my fleet waits for my word to again rain death upon your world. Many have stood where you stand now.
37 at the last count.
And many more still will. I offer you a choice. Surrender or die.
He waited patiently while Selenin translated his speech. They seemed to trip up over the word surrender for a while, but it was an issue that could be resolved by a few frantic motions. Finally, President Sol spoke.
He surrenders and asks what is to become of them,
Selenin translated after much pointless blabbering.
Good, good. You will find me a fair master, President Sol, as long as your people pay my tithe. First, I require 90% of your planters to iridium production.
He paused a moment while Selenin translated, then continued to translate. Then President Sol answered, and another heated discussion sprung up between the two with many gestures that defied explanation.
What is the holdup?
Vakar snapped after a futile 5 minutes. Selenin held up a hand to silence President Sol and turned to face him.
They don't make any,
he said simply.
What?
Vakar goggled.
It is the building block of civilization. How in the seven hells can they do without?
Yevon chomped softly to draw attention.
Sire, do you recall that this is a primitive planet? Primitives, yes. Stone-aged, no.
Vakar snarled, slamming a forearm on the arm of his throne.
What are their cities made of, if not iridium?
They turned to President Sol for an explanation, and after some lengthy translation, Selenin finally provided an answer.
Silicon and iron for the most part, local plant matter in more rural areas.
Vakar twitched. On the one hand, it was impressive that the humans had managed to do so much with what was essentially still raw ore. On the other, it was all completely worthless. A single asteroid mine would have yielded more treasures.
Fine, he growled. We shall accept the tribute in frost and alloys instead.
Again, the translation went on for far too long. Vakar snarled in frustration.
Sorry, sir, he's not familiar with them. Impossible! They have guns, don't they? Vakar snapped. How could they build them without frost and alloys? I believe they use a chemical propellant, Yevon replied. It is really quite an ingenious solution to the lack of good superconductors. I'm glad that you find their tinkering amusing.
Vakar glared into empty air as he considered what even a world of primitives might have access to.
Very well.
What about osmonics? It took Selenin only a few minutes to return with a solid no. Molcolate substrates? No. Conine matrices? No. Testine fibers? No. Brunian crystals? Sir? Did you make that one up? Yes, Vakar snapped, massaging his aching crest. This is ridiculous. They had that dinky space station. What was that made of? A few moments later, he had his answer. Aluminium, mostly. Aluminium, Vakar exclaimed in horror, and it was still in one piece. Madness! Bravery, but madness! He shook his head. And to think he considered ordering the station boarded, his men would have mutinied the moment they'd figured it out. It seems, he began, after some consideration, that we will not be extracting any mineral wealth. Instead, we'll take our tithe as slaves. Sell then inform the president that we... Chevin chuffed pointedly. Vakar shot him a threatening look. You have something to say, first officer? Sir, we don't want any. The ache in his crest seemed to be building upon itself and spreading to his mandibles. Weren't you complaining just yesterday that we lack ready hands for the lower decks? Yes, sir. However, what I need to fill those roles is trained spacers, not an illiterate mob of barely trained maggots who've never been off their home planet before. We don't want them. Vakar sighed. Fine! I'm sure they can serve as plantation slaves. The nearest market is 9 months' travel. We'd lose money on shipping alone, and that's even if we could figure out how to keep them alive that long. Battle thralls, then, Vakar snapped. We can always use more battle thralls. Yevon gave President Sol a pointed look. Humans lacked much in the way of claws, armor plate, or even a good grace to be poisonous. Unless he armed the rabble, they would be little more than a snack for most shock troopers, and Vakar had not gotten where he was in life by arming the very people trying to kill him. Yes, Vakar sighed. I knew that was a stupid idea the moment I said it. They must have something. Art! Rich idiots go nuts over Xeno art. Art by famous artists, yes. But do you remember what happened last time we thought to drum up prices and cultural artifacts? Vakar opened his mouth to snap, then paused. Come to think of it, there had been a lot of salt involved in that set of decisions, and the final conclusion was unclear. No. Yevon shuffled. We're still carting around a light opera. Really? Well, isn't that a thing? Schedule the performance when we get back underway. Sir? What should I tell President Sol? Selenin interjected. Vakar stared at the pudgy Sophont for a long moment. On the one hand, he had destroyed 3 cities and innumerable small military bases, lost a couple dozen troops, and burned through an alarming amount of fuel to take over this worthless chunk of dirt. On the other, Vakar hadn't become the despoiler by throwing good money after bad. Right, tell him that he's officially part of my great and glorious empire. Let the men out on 3-day shore leave and let them loot whatever they feel. Yevon, requisition consumables enough to fill the holds and prepare to depart as soon as everyone is back from shore leave. I'll return to my flagship and get the scouts out looking for somewhere more useful. Understood? Sir. Excellent. Vakar rose to his feet and, completely ignoring the human, began to stride out of the room. Oh, Yevon, he said suddenly, pausing mid-stride. Whatever happened to that colony ship we found? The one you called laughably primitive. Yes, sir. We pressed the colonists into service and have been carting it around with a skeleton crew. Some of the industrial equipment is of use to the fleet train. Irreplaceable? Certainly not. Vakar shrugged. Land it and leave it for the maggots to play with. Maybe next time we're in the sector they'll have made something useful of themselves. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Caspar Arnholtz, Dragzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.